Did you know that W.E.B. Du Bois had a long-standing affair with the woman that he brought on as literary editor of The Crisis? And did you also know that this woman, Redmon Fauset, is also the one who is responsible for the discovery of so many of the artists of the Harlem Renaissance that you know, like Langston Hughes and Nella Larsen and Countee Cullen? Well, you can actually find out all of this information and more in the new historical fiction novel by Victoria Christopher Murray, Harlem Rhapsody. Now, I'm not here to give you a book review. That is going to come soon, but I am here to talk to you a little bit more about some of the works that, if you're interested in the Harlem Renaissance or have read this book or are interested in picking up this book, that you should grab, add to your TBR to learn a little bit more. So I would start with some of the main literary figures that do pop up in this novel, and I definitely would start with Nella Larsen's passing. Passing is discussed a lot in Harlem Rhapsody, and it's definitely something that was a huge topic at the time, especially as you're talking about Black artists coming to the forefront, and especially the struggles. There were some Black artists that did not want to identify as Black artists, and that's a conversation that definitely could be had and was had at the time, and that I think that we're continuing to have to this very day. And so Nella Larsen's passing has also been adapted into a movie. It's absolutely phenomenal. I would encourage everybody to check that out. I think it is still on Netflix, but the novel itself, I read it in high school and I absolutely loved it. It was life-changing. Another one of the artists that pops up in the novel is James Weldon Johnson. The autobiography of an ex-colored man was really a monumental piece of work that greatly influenced a lot of other artists at the time. At first, it was published anonymously, and then later we found out that it was James Weldon Johnson in the 1920s, and he definitely rose to the forefront of the Harlem Renaissance, and he's very well known, of course, for Lift Every Voice and Sings, a very pivotal figure in Black history. And then we got to move into W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois is one of my heroes. I admire so much of his work and his mind. And so one of the first novels or works of his that is discussed in Harlem Rhapsody outside of The Souls of Black Folk, which is one of his most iconic pieces of literature, is also Dark Water. Dark Water, Voices from Within the Veil, came out after The Souls of Black Folk, and it really is a phenomenal collection of essays, and also you do get a science fiction story at the end titled The Comet. And so I think that this is one of my favorite pieces of work from W.E.B. Du Bois. And if you want to learn a little bit more about him, kind of how he was evolving in thought throughout his life, I would definitely encourage you to not just read The Souls of Black Folk and, listen to what you've heard about, criticism of his talented 10th idea, but reading more about him, because he definitely was a figure that was constantly evolving and learning and writing more. Now, this kind of encompasses all of those artists and more if you are interested in reading more of the people that were involved in the Harlem Renaissance and kind of want a more comprehensive text. And so I would say that one of the kind of referred to as the definitive work of the Harlem Renaissance is The New Negro Voices of the Harlem Renaissance, which was edited by Alain Locke. He pops up in Harlem Rhapsody as a key figure, and Redmon Fauset had some interesting feelings about Alain Locke. And so I would definitely encourage everybody to kind of pick this up, add this to your library, because it has so much of the work of a variety of different figures like Jean Toomer and Bruce Nougat and Claude McKay and James Weldon Johnson, Langston Hughes, Anna Spencer, and even Jessie Fauset herself. So this is kind of one of the collections that I think that if you're interested in the Harlem Renaissance, you should definitely think about picking up. And I don't want to make this too W.E.B. Du Bois heavy, but I think that one of the most important books that if you pick up Harlem Rhapsody, you should definitely check out is David Lettering Lewis's biography of W.E.B. Du Bois. There is not a lot of information about the actual affair that he had because of the fact that W.E.B. Du Bois was one of the most important men at that time, and his wife knew of his affairs, and Redmon Fauset. There is not as much information about her out there, and so you only kind of get the bits and pieces that that are mostly connected to W.E.B. Du Bois and his activities. And so learning a little bit more about his life can help you learn a lot more about the time, what was going on, sort of like the culture of thought at that particular time. And you also learn, and the author of Harlem Rhapsody, she really diving into W.E.B. Du Bois' biography, learning about the sort of love affair that him and Jessie Redmon Fauset had, the fact that they were always seen together, and sort of those sort of eyewitness statements helped her to even get to the point where she could write Harlem Rhapsody. So learning more about W.E.B. Du Bois will help you to learn so much more about the Harlem Renaissance and even what happened beyond it. And I guess I really couldn't end this video without kind of plugging James Baldwin and his work, but Jessie Redmon Fauset, she kind of fell into obscurity after she left the crisis. After a not as successful literary career, she returned back to the classroom and began to teach. One of the students that she likely came across during her teaching career in her later years was actually James Baldwin. And so you can see the lasting effect of the Harlem Renaissance on figures like James Baldwin. And so not just focusing on the literature of the Harlem Renaissance, but seeing the way that thought kind of evolved throughout Black literature over the years following the Harlem Renaissance is a great takeaway that I think that you can have from that era, because these artists didn't just disappear. Some of them did fall into obscurity. Some of them did not continue writing as renowned literature, but they were still there and they were still inspiring those that came after them. So James Baldwin is one of those children of the Harlem Renaissance, you could say, specifically one of those that likely came across Jessie Redmon Fauset in her later years. And so I loved reading Harlem Rhapsody because it gave me so much insight into the Harlem Renaissance. And I would encourage you to check out that novel too, and also the books that I have listed in this video. I will catch y'all in the next one, and always remember that you are loved.